Hi there, this is Jimmy Roberts. You know, when it comes to the game of golf, there is no place on earth like the metropolitan area. It's always been a special place for the game of golf and also for golf writing. Some of the most esteemed and accomplished journalists covering the game work here. Now, you'll get a chance to hear them right here on the Metropolitan Golf Writers Association podcast. Enjoy.
Hank Gola, welcome to the Metropolitan Golf Writers podcast.
Thank you, Gord.
Okay.
President of the Metropolitan Golf Writers
Well, I
Association.
know that wasn't. Listen, that was going to be my big reveal, so you just spoiled it. Listen, Hank, I know that most of the people who listen to this podcast know who you are and know your auspicious credentials in sports writing. But I'm going to read a very truncated bio, just so those who don't know who you are going to appreciate who I'm talking to. Okay, here we go. Hank Gola has spent more than 4 decades as a journalist, covering professional football and golf for the New York Daily News and the New York Post. Hank started his career in New Jersey at the Herald News of Passaic and the Daily Record of Morris County, where he covered the Cosmos of the North American Soccer League and the New York Football Giants. Can we stop saying football since they left in 1958?
50s. Yeah.
Okay. Hank's talent as a sports writer has earned several awards over the years. Notably, in 2018, he received the coveted Lincoln Werden Award for his golf journalism from the Metropolitan Golf Writers Association, an honor he shares with the likes of Jim McKay, Chris Schenkel, Dave Anderson, John Feinstein, and George Pepper. Ryder Cup Rivals, which is what we're going to talk about today, is Hank's 4th book. In 1987, he published Hard Nose with Jim Burt, the inside story of the Giants' 1968 Super Bowl season. And in
86.
I'm sorry? 1986.
You said
What did
68. 80. They were nowhere near the Super Bowl in 68.
What did I say? 68?
Yeah, you said 68,
sorry.
but that's okay.
All right.
86.
My dad was a big Giants fan. And in 1998, he published an unauthorized biography of young golfer Tiger Woods, which killed his chances of ever interviewing Tiger Woods in subsequent years.
That's correct. Yes, and never ever getting anything out of him. Yeah.
Okay. You and every other journalist. After nearly 4 years of meticulous research involving more than 75 personal interviews, Hank published City of Champions, a book that tells the story of the people and the drama behind the Garfield High School Boilermakers in their quest to win the National Football Championship in 1939. And I interviewed you on my podcast, Golf Yeah, in 2019 about that book, which I really enjoyed asking you about it. But I do have a couple follow-up questions related to that interview. You mentioned to me that at that time you had played 873 golf courses, and your goal was 1,000.
Oh, okay.
So what number are you up to now?
951.
951.
I've slowed up since I was covering golf because I just don't go to as many places. But I'm hoping to get to 1,000. I've got Cypress Point, and that's kind of going to be my 1,000th. That's my
Okay.
target.
And you had played.
So we'll see how that goes. I'll keep you posted. But that's so 87. What was it?
873 in 2019.
73. All right, that's not bad. But I got to pick up the pace a little bit.
You had also at that time played 7 of the top 10 courses, however top 10 is defined. What are you up to now?
I think it's 8 right now, but it depends on what rankings you use. I think I've got 8 of them.
Exactly. And everybody knows they pay off the sports writers and the publications to make them in the top 10 or 25.
My course is climbing up the rankings. North Jersey is climbing up the rankings. So we just made top 10 in golf.com's state rankings. And we were in Golf Weekly's top 200 classic courses.
That's great. How much are you paying for that?
Nothing. Not even maybe a free round of golf. I'm not sure about that.
Before we get into your book, and I have a copy right here, I'm going to hold it up so everybody knows what it looks like, except it looks backwards.
That's it.
That is the book. You got to look at it in the mirror to recognize it on the bookshelf.
Yeah, that's those hands of the 99 team.
Before we get into it, one of the things you said to me in 2019 was You don't profit from writing a book, considering the time you put into it. And was that also the case? You don't know yet because you don't know how much money you've made to make off.
I hope this one's different.
You told me you made $5,000.
I did not profit from City of Champions, but I profited from doing it. That was a great experience. It's probably the best thing ever. Somebody told me, "Oh, this is the best thing you ever wrote, this Ryder Cup Rivals," but it's not. City of Champions.
And you're a local hero for writing that book, right? Yeah. You going to Dunkin' Donuts and they give you free coffee? They
still love me in Garfield. Yep.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about your book. I assume most people that are listening to this podcast know all about the Ryder Cup, but for those who don't, can you just give us like a 2-minute historical background of why it was established and the difference between the Ryder and the Walker Cups?
There was this guy, Samuel Ryder, and he was a seed merchant, lived in England, and he made his fortune selling penny packets to the common man. Of course, in the late 19th century, England still had a bit of aristocracy going, and there were these great gardens everywhere. But the guy in the street really didn't have anything, so he thought of the idea of selling them seed packets so that they could have their own gardens at their own little plots by their house, and it just took off. He made his fortune that way. He got involved in golf, and then in the plight of professional golf in the UK. In that the professional players were tied to their clubs. They were like indentured servants of the clubs that they worked at. And they weren't able to spend as much time practicing at their game, working at their game. And at the same time, American golf was evolving, and the American golfers were getting better and better. And Ryder foresaw that the British players, if they were going to compete with the Americans eventually, needed to break that tie with their clubs and kind of get out there on their own and work. And eventually came up with the idea for the Ryder Cup. And the Walker Cup was already in existence, matching the best amateurs in the British Isles against the best amateurs in the U.S. So this was basically a professional version of the Walker Cup. And they kind of tried it out in 1926, and England ran away with it. It was a ridiculous score, but it was because the U.S. could not bring their best players. They ended up having a trick shot artist on the team. Maybe they would have had you on the team if you were around at the time. But they were fairly handled. And in 27, it changed. The Ryder Cup came over here for the first time. The trophy was awarded. The actual trophy was awarded for the first time. And they contested it at Worcester Country Club in Massachusetts, and the Americans won handily. Okay, so that's the quick version.
When did the Solheim Cup start?
I'm not sure. Okay. That's a good question.
That's your next book.
I should know that, but I don't. Okay. But it certainly doesn't go back to 1927. Yeah. I'm sure it's after the war.
Okay. So why did you decide to write about the Ryder Cup? I know when I spoke to you in 2019, you were thinking about a couple other books, including one on Little League.
Yes, I was, which I might get to eventually. But I wasn't really thinking about doing anything at the time. And then my publisher, Chris Solovic, who had published City of Champions, came to me. "You want to do another book?" I said, "Not really. I don't know." He said, "Well, how about this society?" Because David Barrett had done something of this sort on the Masters and then the U.S. Open as well. And we're throwing around a few ideas. I said, "Well, about the Ryder Cup?" I said, coming up at Bethpage, good timing for it. And we started talking about it. And then he told me that he would give me a much better advance than he gave me the last time. So I was in on that. Boy, so that was the inspiration, the better advance.
What year did you start it?
It took a year to write.
A year.
Yeah, because we needed to do it. We wanted to get it out before this Ryder Cup, which is the reason I didn't end up doing all interviews with all the participants, because I know well enough it was going to add. If I had done that and done it for every one of the Ryder Cups I was writing about, because if it was one Ryder Cup, let's say I was writing about the 1999 Ryder Cup in Brookline, it would have been one thing. There's only a limited number of players who are involved. But now you're talking about 13 chapters that I wrote. So, and the modern guys, so go back to like probably 57 was the last one where there would be some guys still around. Anyway, it was going to be a monumental task. It would probably have added at least a year or two to the process, and we had to get it on quickly. So we decided just basically a research-based book.
You must have spent a lot. I mean, that year must have been fully devoted to looking at the research, the volume of research in the back of the book. You must have spent most of that year working on this thing, right?
Maybe. I don't know. I played a lot of golf.
Okay.
Too,
did you use AI to research?
I stuck that in there. I don't know. As a journalist, as a sports writer, you're trained to make deadlines.
Yeah.
That's really important. You can't blow any deadlines. They're going to be working for a newspaper, at least back in the day when newspapers were newspapers and sports sections were sports sections. So I've been trained to write expediently, as Walt Michaels would say. So I just streamlined everything, and I'm a really good researcher. I know where to go and how to search for things and find things. So it might have taken someone else longer than it took me, but that's like right up my alley. I've been doing that my entire career. Yeah. So the process wasn't as long.
Plus, you had that $1 million advance, so you kind of had an obligation to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Did you read the other books, the existing books, before you started or decided?
I didn't read them all, but I knew I hunted down every book that was written by a Ryder Cup player or captain, and then I read the pertinent parts, the parts that pertain to the Ryder Cup. So I kind of scoured everything available, the archives. I went through all the newspapers, the British newspapers. And again, it's similar to what I did for City of Champions, just finding things, uncovering things that were really fun and I wanted to bring to the surface. So as I said about City, it's when you do research, and I love research, and you come across a nugget, it's like uncovering buried treasure that would not be out there, kind of hidden in the ground and would never come to light. So that's really, that's the best thing about it. That's what I really enjoy the most, doing the research and finding things out and telling the story that wouldn't otherwise be told.
Are you one of those guys with metal detectors I see at the beach? Is that that's the equivalent?
No, I'm looking for paper, so I don't think that would work.
How did you decide which matches to cover? There have been, 44, 45 is coming up.
I didn't have a number to start with, but I picked out the most, what I felt were the most compelling, most consequential, most memorable. And if it kind of changed the direction of the Ryder Cup, it was in. That's what I was looking for. So not necessarily like the greatest Ryder Cup. So it was pretty much, I wanted to establish a flow. So from 27 up till 2016 was the last one that I did, that you could see how the Ryder Cup evolved. That was kind of the idea.
Did you have a pretty good sense of past Ryder Cups, or was it all deep?
Well, I covered 8 of them. So and before that, you know about, everybody knows about the concession and that stuff.
We're gonna talk about that.
But the early ones, obviously, I had no idea other than the guys that were playing in them. I knew of Snead and Nelson and Walter Hagen, and then Henry Cotton and a couple of the Brits. But exactly what happened and the stories behind it, that's what I was fleshing out.
Okay. Is that how you wanted the book to be different from what had preceded?
Yeah, well, I've got 13 chapters or 13 different Ryder Cups, and each of them each chapter is like a short story. So it's almost as if you were reading, there was a Sports Illustrated article that came out at the end and summarized the entire event, and you were reading it, as it happened, or immediately after the event happened. So kind of that was my idea of doing it. So each one of those is you go in there and read one of them, and you've got something.
Sure.
You don't necessarily have to read the entire book. If you're interested in one particular, if you're interested in the War on the Shore, you could read that chapter and skip around. But it does go in chronological order.
I Googled the question, how does Hank Gola's book differ from the other Ryder Cup books? I went to an AI platform.
What did AI have to say?
I'm going to read it to you, right?
It was very complimentary to me.
According to Perplexity, quote, Hank Gola's book immerses readers in the intensity and drama of Ryder Cup rivalries, making it the top choice for those seeking gripping stories of golf's legendary head-to-head battles over nearly a century. So Gunga Galunga, you got that going for you, which is nice, right?
I love AI. They're very intelligent. When we're talking about intelligence, artificial, that's intelligence right there. They know what they're talking about.
I kind of find it gives you an answer that they think you want, but congratulations. So yeah. I'm glad they didn't rip me. That's good. So, I mean, talk to me a little bit about your research process. I mean, you have almost 400 pages of detail. You're digging through a lot of archives. How do you balance between storytelling and historical accounts?
I just wrote it as a sports writer.
Okay.
I mean, I am a good historian. I am paid a lot of attention to detail. So I wanted to paint the backstory as well, and I wanted to let the readers know exactly what was going on at the time, what was going on in the UK. Like, for instance, the 47 chapter coming out of the war, what the situation was like there and here. But it's kind of like just what I do, you know. And when you're writing a profile piece or a takeout piece for a newspaper, you really want to engage the reader and keep them engaged. So the best way to do that is through telling stories. So it wasn't that hard. It's kind of what I always did anyway. But so the balance is there, though. There's definitely a balance, because there's some parts of it where I get a little inside baseball with what was going on in the kind of, like, for instance, the economy. Not that I'm it's like a economics class or anything, but I did get a little bit into what was going on in the UK after the war and comparing it to the booming economy in the USA and how that actually set up the disparity that occurred in the Ryder Cups immediately after the war, where the US was just dominating them. And it was for a reason. It was just the way things progressed in each country, and kind of set up the until Europe came in.
Yeah,
that was how it's going to be. But that was a direct result of World War II and how that reset global powers and all of that stuff.
Well, in 47, from your book, I learned that the Ryder Cup almost didn't happen, or the series almost ended. And it was saved. Can you tell the story about how it got saved by this guy, Robert Hudson, out in Oregon?
Yeah, Robert Hudson. He was the Piggly Wiggly guy of Portland. He was a self-made man, very similar to the self-made golfers of the era, where they would come up caddying. He came up sweeping floors in the local supermarket in Portland, Oregon, and worked his way up. So, and he had an affinity for golfers. He loved golf. He loved watching golf. He wasn't a great golfer himself. He was a member of the Portland Golf Club. And as usual, the British team was having, or the British PGA was having trouble funding the team. And it didn't look like they were going to get over here. And it didn't. And, you know, if they didn't do it that year, they may not have done it at all. It might have just kind of been the demise of the whole thing. And Hudson stepped up, and he funded the whole shooting match. I mean, the Brits didn't pay for a thing. And as I mentioned, their economy was in a shambles. They were on full rationing and everything. And it was like, Thanksgiving bounty. I mean, when they got over here, I mean, I think on the way over, on the ship over, Henry Cotton ate 2 sirloins just because he'd never seen anything like that until before the war. So they were gorging and everything. They loved it. They got thrashed 11-1. But if not for Robert Hudson stepping in and doing that, who knows what would have happened? The thing might have collapsed. And also, he stayed very active after that. He had another home in Palm Springs, and that's why the Ryder Cup ended up in Palm Springs in 55. He was behind that as well. But he was so appreciated by the Brits for his efforts that they put him on the board of directors of the British PGA. He is the only man who served on both board of directors of the PGA of America and the British PGA. But the other thing about that is, of course, he did insist that the Ryder Cup be played at his home
Right.
club in Portland. They ended up playing it in November, and November is the worst time for rain in the Pacific Northwest. And who was it who said it was? Reese said it was like playing in India during the monsoon season. It was unplayable. They basically played golf on an unplayable golf course. But they got it.
Now, you mentioned Dyrese a lot of times in your book. Can you talk a little bit about him?
He was the wee Welshman. Grew up on a golf course on the outskirts. His father was the door-to-door pro at the club. What was the name of the club? I'm sorry, I should remember that.
You have to read the book.
But there was a guy who took him under his wing, the club champion there. So because his father had an all-encompassing job, he didn't really have much time to deal with him, and he just got into golf. I mean, that was his backyard. The putting green was his backyard. He developed an interesting swing, an interesting grip that had a little flick in it at the end because he had to. His mother. He had to avoid breaking windows in the clubhouse. So he had learned how to put the ball up in the air as a 5-year-old. So, but he also had a small hand, so he had all 5 fingers on the club, if you can imagine that. And that's how he played his entire career. He was one of the best players in Britain. He played on 10 or captained 10 Ryder Cups in all. He was a great player, a really good player, and then he turned out to be a very good captain as well. He captained the British team at Lindrick when they won in '57, and it was the first time they'd won since before the war.
I want to talk a little bit about 1957 because you feature terrible-tempered Tommy Bolt in that chapter, and my dad used to talk about him all the time because he I think in '54 he won the Insurance City Open, which is now the Travelers tournament. Did he make a negative impression? I mean, it was pretty cantankerous. I mean, it was
throwing clubs, that sort of thing.
But I mean, he was fueled by the crowd, and then in one of his matches, the guy brought out a chair because he was playing
Eric Brown, who later he was the captain in '69 actually during the Concession. But Eric Brown was basically his alter guy in the UK. He was a very surly Scot, very hot-headed, and when you put those two together, you were bound to get an explosion, and they did. And of course, Brown was giving him no quarter, and there was gamesmanship going on both sides. And then the crowd started getting on Bolt and really getting under his skin. And at one point, Eric Brown thought that Bolt was slow playing him. So he sent his caddy, they were near the clubhouse, and he sent his caddy into the clubhouse and he came out with a folding chair. And Brown sat in it and just folded his arms and was waiting for Bolt to make a shot. He should be out there for Patrick Cantlay.
Exactly.
But this year, but that infuriated Bolt, and he stormed off. At the end of the match, he snapped his 6-iron across his.
Yeah, and refused to shake hands. Right. Yeah.
Refused to shake hands, but he wasn't the only one. Christy O'Connor refused to shake hands with, who the heck was it? Whoever his match was.
But I just wondered if that match left.
Well, I believe, but there was a lot of stuff going on in that one because the Americans were basically blindsided. They did not send over their best team. There was some crazy, you had to serve an apprenticeship before you could play in the Ryder Cup. So Arnold Palmer was out, and Billy Casper was out because they hadn't finished their apprenticeship. There was also a thing where you had to play in the PGA Championship to play in a Ryder Cup. And Carey Middlecoff, who was probably one of the best, obviously was one of the top 5 players in the world at the time, didn't play in the PGA Championship for different reasons, and he wasn't eligible to play in the Ryder Cup team. So they thought they could just get by because they'd always been just getting by, and this time the Brits were ready for him, put out a really good team, and they had and Di Reese was the captain of that team. And Di Reese was the first captain who actually tinkered with the golf course to make it advantageous for his side. And in terms of the grass behind the green and taking certain strengths away from the Americans, the green speeds, the green firmness, the fairway. He was the first guy who really took advantage of that rule and being able to set up the golf course for his team.
Is 57 where kind of the animosity began, where crowds got engaged?
No, the animosity began in 1927.
No, but I mean in terms of the crowd engagement and the booing.
Well, there was some talk of the British crowds being rude in 37, and that created somewhat of a controversy that the PGA of America had to put down. A couple of the guys, mostly whose wife was it? Who was Ralph Gouldall's wife was really complaining about the conduct of the crowds in 37, and that became a big issue once they got back. There was nothing said while they were there, but once they got back, a number of the players went off on the conduct of the British crowds. But
yeah,
it's a passionate thing.
Can we talk about coaches for a little while? I mean, what's your view of? I'm not sure how it happened in the past, but the current process for selection of coaches and whether coaches really make a difference.
Captains,
yeah.
U.S. captains. Well, they didn't. Well, Hagen, who I think was the first. How many Ryder Cups did he captain? He captained through 37. Every Ryder Cup before the war, he was the U.S. captain. But he was a master of gamesmanship. He was like, there wasn't another of his ilk until Seve Ballesteros came around. But again, Hagen, for instance, 27, they're taking this, the Brits are taking a voyage across the Atlantic, which I think took 7 days. And you kind of you get sea legs in 7 days. You kind of, on an ocean liner, not really ready to play golf as soon as you get off the boat. And probably the first thing you want to do is take a nap. But Hagen met them at the pier in New York, and he had limos ready for them. And he kind of shuffled them into limos and took them down to meet Jimmy Walker, the mayor of New York City, and made a big deal about it. And then he took them up to what is now Westchester Country Club, which was then the Biltmore Hotel. And he had a big dinner the day they arrived, and then a putting exhibition on the putting green. With spotlight, with floodlights and everything else. And basically, if they were not exhausted when they got off the boat, they were that night. In fact, the next day he took them to Yankee. It wasn't just a 1 day thing. The next day he took them to Yankee Stadium, saw Babe Ruth and the Yankees. Babe Ruth did not hit one of his home runs that day, but the Brits were in attendance. And by the time they got to Worcester, they were pretty beat, I would say. And then even over there, he was pulling stuff. So he was a master of gamesmanship, and that just continued almost at every Ryder Cup after that, at least as long as he was the captain.
But gamesmanship aside, do captains really have a big influence?
Do they? Well, they do. Yeah, they can. I mean, Di Reese was probably the first captain to affect the Ryder Cup because of the course setup. It really did affect the U.S. won the singles back then. I'm sorry. Back then there was only one session of alternate shot. It was a 2-day tournament or 2-day event. So the U.S. went 3-1 up in alternate shot, and then the next day were 8 singles matches, 8 36-hole singles matches, and everything. The weather came in before the singles matches, but he had set up the course with firm greens so that the Americans couldn't spin balls back as they were accustomed to. Fast fairways so the Brits could use their, keep it on the ground game, because the U.S., of course, with more high ball hitting. And then a special type of rough behind the greens that he had his greenskeeper come out and use an instrument to fluff it up. and to make it more difficult. So because the U.S. had better short games, they were, believe it or not, at the time, the Americans had a much better short games than the Brits, but they had never encountered this type of grass before, and that kind of screwed them up. So Di Reese was the first captain who actually, I think, influenced the Ryder Cup. I mean, Ben Hogan was a captain, and I guess what he did was challenge the grooves on the British clubs one year, and had them working all night at grinding clubs out. But Di Reese was the first, and then after that, I mean, now Seve was a great captain. What Seve did at Valderrama was incredible. He was everywhere, and he made Tom Kite look like he didn't know what he was doing. I think Paul Azinger was a great captain at Valhalla in setting up the pod system and just changing the attitude of the players and how they were going to go about things. So you don't need to be a good captain, but the ones that do, they really the great captains do stand out, and they do make a difference.
Is it
not every Ryder Cup makes a difference, but there are captains that make a difference.
Is it the pairing strategies that are?
Well, it's course setup,
yeah,
and the pairing strategies, and for instance, Zinger with his pod system broke the team up into four guys, and had one of his vice captains in charge of those four guys. Those were the pods, so they did everything together. So they became little teams. He got the idea from watching a Navy SEALs documentary, and it was extremely effective. And he also handpicked somebody to go after Sergio Garcia. It's in the book. We were sitting around at the airport after the British Open, where Sergio just basically blew the Open, and Patrick Harrington ended up winning it, coming down the stretch, and afterwards blaming everybody but himself for losing, including he was talking about the guys raking the bunkers, and they were taking too long, and how complaining about he would hit the flagstick and it would roll out to 25 feet, and others would hit this flagstick and it would stick there and just had a tap in. I mean, every demon was in his head. So we were sitting around the airport on the way back with Zinger and some American writers, and we were just saying, and he was saying, we have to get into Sergio's head. Sergio is the key to that. He was the spark plug to the European team at the previous maybe 2 or 3 Ryder Cups. He said, but if we could get Sergio, in other words, we take Sergio down, everything goes down after that. So sure enough, on singles day, they put Sergio out first, which he anticipated. He put Anthony Kim out first, and although Kim has kind of fallen off the golf map these days, back then he was a killer. And he was just a dog on Sergio's, a pit bull on his leg. And I was walking with them for that match, and we went out it was at the first hole, and they each had a very similar short putt, maybe 2 feet. And Sergio said to Kim, he says, good. And Kim looked at him, he said, no, let's putt him. So he set the terms on the first hole that it was going to be that kind of match. And he pretty much, he took him down. And sure enough, once Sergio went down, the rest of the team went down quite easily. So it could, again, it depends. The captain, sometimes you don't need him, sometimes you do. Sometimes the team needs a little kick in the rear end too. Ben Crenshaw at 99, I think he did a very good job as captain because he had a lot on his plate. He had a lot to take care of. There were a lot of other issues going on. The pay for play issue was going on. So he had to be very, and Ben was a very mystical guy. Golf was sacred to him. So the fact that these guys were complaining about money, oh man, this was the
Harvey Pinnock.
Nothing
Harvey Pinnock's rolling over in his grave.
Holy thing, and he managed to get that team on track and focused, and then Mark James ended up playing into his hands on Sunday, and we know what happened.
So you covered 8 Ryder Cups as a sports writer. Do you have any other backstories like that, like the Azinger, we've got to take Sergio down strategy, where you saw stuff that it either isn't in the book?
Not quite that. I mean, of course, everybody knows 99 and Crenshaw wagging his finger. And then it was interesting because '99, which kind of was still my favorite Ryder Cup to cover, Mark James was the British captain. And he ended up writing a book, Into the Bear Trap, which was very critical of the Boston fans. And in some way it was justified, but in other ways, he really didn't have that team prepared for it. And that's what I meant by being a good captain. You have to have your team prepared for every eventuality. And so they seemed to be surprised by the conduct of the Boston fans. And I said, look, if what he should have done with his team is taken them to Fenway Park and sent them in the bleachers when the Yankees were in town and said, this is what you're going to have in store for you. You know, this is not going to be the Augusta patrons, you know, applauding politely every good shot, you know. So that happened. And then the other thing that he did, if you remember on Sunday, and I think this is why Crenshaw wagged his finger and said, I think I've got a good feeling about it, because he saw James' lineup the next day. And Mark James sat his three rookies. Again, this is how a captain could make or break a Ryder Cup. He sat his three rookies in every session, all four sessions, and then had to play them in singles. And they were playing for the first time all week. And he lined them up like dominoes. He had, he had Jarmo Sandelin in the 3 spot against Phil Mickelson. He had Jean Van der Velde of British Open fame in the 4 spot against Davis Love, and he had Andrew Coulthard at number 5 against Tiger. And in the first 2 spots, Crenshaw wisely sent out his 2 like war horses. He sent out Tom Lehman and Hal Sutton. And they beat up on Westwood and I forget the other guy who was but these guys were pretty much exhausted from playing every match. He overplayed them. And once they won, so anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and from then it was just an avalanche after that. Momentum built and changed, and that's how Ryder Cups are won and lost.
You mentioned Van der Velde.
The other good thing about that one is I was inside the ropes, right on line with Justin Leonard's putt on 17, the 45-footer. I mean, he could, if there were no other spectators there, he would have asked me to move. I was directly in his line. And Tom Lehman's wife was to my left. She was kneeling to my left. And of course, we all remember the Stampede and how everybody trampled all over Jose Maria Olazabal's line, unfortunately, and how this became a huge thing in Britain. And these were the ugly Americans, and how could they do this? Well, the reason I think the Stampede happened is because as soon as Leonard's ball fell in the cup, Tom Lehman's wife, it was like Usain Bolt out of the blocks. I mean, I've never seen, it was amazing. Zoop. And, and everybody followed. As soon as she went, she was the first one, and like everything after that, it was almost like an avalanche. The hot dog vendors were out there. It was crazy. The only guys who weren't out there were the media, because we were just kneeling. You behave yourself. You can kind of control your emotions. So we were the only people who ended up kneeling. Even the players got out there.
She wasn't wearing heels, was she?
First of all, I don't look. I said this at a book signing yesterday, and the ladies in the audience weren't really happy about it. But I don't know why the wives are. Sometimes it baffles me why they're inside the ropes like that. It just. I know the whole thing, but I don't know. That was an example of it going awry, I suppose.
Are we going to have to edit that section out?
Maybe.
Okay.
Let me think about that, Gordon.
Okay. So,
they're very nice. I love them. It's very nice to talk to them, but yeah, it's a little weird. It's just weird sometimes.
It's like having Taylor Swift at a football game.
Yeah,
it increases the audience and the attention. Talk a little bit about the concession. And in all honesty, and I may have to edit this out, I've never been a big Jack Nicklaus fan, but he did something that's long remembered. Talk a little bit about your view on it.
Well, first of all, let me back up. That was 1969. It was at Royal Birkdale, and Jack Nicklaus was playing in his first Ryder Cup. By that time, he had already won 7 majors and completed the career Grand Slam. And because of the crazy PGA of America regulations and who could play in a Ryder Cup, he had not yet completed his PGA apprenticeship. And was therefore ineligible to play in every Ryder Cup until he finally had done so in 1969. So I mean, that's crazy. He couldn't. He didn't know how to sell shirts, so he couldn't play until he learned how to sell shirts, the right price. But 69 was actually one of his off years. He wasn't at the top of his game in 69, and maybe the best player in the world was Tony Jacklin, who had won the U.S. Open and was just on fire. And they ended up getting paired against each other. This was actually the second, the concession, which was the match that the concession occurred in, was actually their second singles match. Tony Jacklin had won the first 18-hole match. They played 2 singles matches back then, 2 single sessions. So the matches are very close, and it's coming down. They're in the final group on Sunday, and it's coming down to the end. And Jack is able to summon up his greatness. The great ones can always do that, it seems. Will themselves back, even though he was having a bad year and not a great Ryder Cup. But down the stretch, Jack became Jack again, and it was just a great battle. And came down to the last hole. They each hit really good shots into the green. In the gloaming, it was getting very dark at the time, so it was almost in the twilight. Everybody was around the green, both teams. Everybody on site was around that green, and Jack had a longer putt and ran it 5 feet past, and Jacklin was about 2.5 feet. I think it was 2.5 feet. Maybe closer to 2, or between 2 and 2.5. It was somewhere in that grade, right? It was. Let me put it that way. It was a putt that's not always given in a Ryder Cup.
Outside the leather.
And Jack, it wasn't an easy putt. So Jack makes his 5-footer, right? And now that secures the tie and enables the U.S. to retain the cup, because if you're the previous winner, you retain the cup in the case of a tie. So Jacklin, if he had missed that, if he had made it, it would have remained a tie. And if he had missed his putt, the U.S. would have won the whole thing, or won the score. And Jack picked up, as he was picking his ball out of the hole, he picked up Tony's coin and gave it to him. So the match ended up in a tie, and the U.S. retained the cup. However, and it was seen and still seen as one of the great moments of examples of sportsmanship in sports history. It was magnanimous. I think so. But at the time, nobody wrote about it. I was researching all these papers. Everybody wrote about the fact that Nicklaus made the 5-footer. It was a great putt under pressure. But not that he gave the putt. It only grew over time into the legend it became, the concession. So that's kind of crazy. And the other thing is, Jack's teammates, Sam Snead was the captain, and Sam Snead sat Jack for the first session. He's making his Ryder Cup debut. First session, Jack sits. So the golf is going on, the competition has started, and Jack's over on the range hitting balls, which is kind of ridiculous, almost as ridiculous as the fact that he hadn't played until 69. So a lot of people on that team, including Miller Barber, insist that Jack gave Tony that putt to spite Sam Snead. And Sam Snead was really ticked off about the thing. I mean, he wouldn't have given his mother that putt, So there it is. But look, it's become one of the great stories in golf.
Yeah, I think so.
And
let's talk a little bit about what's coming up at at Bethpage Black. Do you have any point of view on that? The team was announced yesterday.
I was surprised that Keegan didn't pick himself. I can see why he did it. But I thought, and the reason for that is just I thought he was laying the groundwork for it. He already talked to the Euros about allowing his vice captains to give advice and that sort of thing. And there was a little back and forth with Rory about being a playing captain. So I thought he was going to pick himself. And he's certainly one of the 12 best Americans in golf right now. There's no question about that. And I think he could have gotten away with it until Sunday. If he had picked himself, I think he could have played himself in the first match. He only had to play himself once a day, right? Not all 4 matches. So he could have played himself in the first match of the first session. And then again on Saturday in the first match of the first session. That would have given him the rest of the day to be the captain. It would have been a little more difficult on Sunday because even if he played himself early, those matches take a long time to finish. And there would be a lot going on in singles that he would have to deal with. So in the end, I'm surprised just because it seemed that he was heading in that direction. But I can see why he didn't pick himself in the end. Would have been interesting.
What about the other team members? Do you have any point of view on guys you're surprised weren't included or were included?
Maybe Colin Morikawa was being included. I could see reasons for all of those. He was picking the hot guys. And so that was kind of his game plan for doing that.
Did the Brits announce?
It's going to be it's an inexperienced team. I think Europe has the edge in rosters, and Europe's a very powerful team. I think they'll come in, and so it's going to take some doing. But again, it's really hard to win on home soil, on a foreign soil.
Well, you played Bethpage Black a couple times, plus you covered the U.S. Open there in 2019, right? And
I covered both opens there. Both opens. Yeah, I covered the one where they were counting out Sergio's waggles. Uno, dos,
what
tres.
about his regrips? How many? Remember he would regrip the clubs. But you said, I think
Patrick Cantley's taken over Sergio Rowe.
But you had mentioned maybe when I spoke to you in 2019 that you said Bethpage Black was really a long hitter's, a bomber's course.
Well, it's interesting because most Ryder Cups, the driver is not. There's no premium on driving. They kind of squeeze the fairways and everything else. It's more on accuracy. But Bethpage is a big course, and you're going to have to move it. So it'll be interesting from that standpoint. Not that Europe doesn't have any bombers. Of course they do. Rory hits as long as anybody. But it's going to put more of a premium on driving than usual. Usually it's second shots and short game and putts. And the other thing about Bethpage is the greens aren't that difficult. Once you get there, they're not difficult to read. So they're going to be. I think we're going to see a lot of birdie putts made. Over the course of
So you're putting your money on Europe, huh?
Well, I think they're the better team, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, right now, if I had to pick one side or the other, I would probably pick the Europeans in a close one.
Do you think that the histrionics, all the screaming and poor display of fansmanship, has overtaken kind of the value of the game itself for the competition? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it happens over there too, by the way. But I've been over there where the European fans were pretty rough, so it's not a one-sided thing. But I think they'll cap it this year. I mean, look, the daily tickets are $750. So how many bleacher bumps are going to get into?
Is that right?
Yeah, $750 a day. So I think if you get in for $750, you don't want to be thrown out, do you?
Yeah, that's true.
So I think people will behave themselves. It'll be interesting if they cap alcohol sales at a certain time. I think we did that in Rome, but it's not there yet. I don't see it at every Ryder Cup. It's erupted. It erupted at Boston for sure, and in a couple of other places. But I don't think it's at the point where it's overtaken anything. I think it's still about the players and the teams.
This is the first year that the PGA is going to pay them a stipend. Is that correct?
Well, they've been paid. They did pay. They started in '99. Brooke Long giving them money, designating money to their favorite charities. So yeah, but this is them actually putting it in their pocket. Yeah.
Is that going to be an issue at all? Are they going to make a big deal?
Oh, it'll make it. Of course, the media makes a big issue out of everything.
We can blame you for that.
We need something to write, right? So that'll come up. It came up in '99, as I said. Crenshaw had to squash that a little bit, and it'll certainly come up with the British press because they're constantly needling and everything else. So yeah, it'll start anything to put a crimp in the Americans. They'll ask about. One funny thing about the two sides, the media. We're always told, I mean, our tradition is no cheering in the press box, right? Contain yourself. You're there to be a sports writer, not to be a fan. Well, that's not true on the European side, especially with the British writers, because the press box is divided in two. The Americans are on the left side and the Europeans are on the right side, the media center. And every time a European win goes up, I mean, they get up and, they just erupt on that side, just everybody's clapping. I think half the American press is rooting against the American team sometimes. It seems that way. But that's an interesting phenomenon we're always looking at it like, well, I haven't covered Ryder Cup in a while. So I'm not quite sure how it is yet today, but I think it is the same way. We're kind of looking over there like, what's the matter with you guys?
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I want to get back to your book. How are you going to promote your book? Somehow you're going to set up in the parking lot?
Yes, I'm going to be going on the MGWA podcast with Gordon Andrew.
I mean, something serious. I mean, are you going to sit in the parking lot and sell books?
No, I've got a number of podcasts. I'm going to be on Ann Ligori's final show on WFAN. Well, I don't, depending on dates. So I'm not sure when this is going up, but it's going to be her final show on FAN on September, the Sunday before Labor Day. And then I'm going to be appearing at the Morristown Festival of Books on October 11th. I'll be doing a presentation and signing and selling there. And that's one of the big book festivals in the country. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll be there with a number of great authors. It's really a cool thing. There's a lot of authors there and a lot of cool presentations, and you get to meet and talk to some of these guys. So I'll be at that one. And then, picking up whatever podcast I can pick up.
Going back to your original mention about your position as president of the MGWA, do you want to plug anything about the association?
I want to plug about our dinner. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to plug our dinner. October 7th at Westchester Country Club. We are honoring Billy Payne, the former chairman of Augusta National. He's going to be getting our Gold Tee Award, which is our highest award, and has been accepted by virtually every great name in golf except for Tiger Woods. That sticks out. He's not fond of the metropolitan media, but maybe one day we'll get him there. Maybe for our 75th anniversary in a couple of years.
I'll give him a call.
But so Craig Stadler will be there. I'm not going to mention his missed putt in 1985, which turned around that Ryder Cup. But he and Kevin will be getting the Family of the Year. And Sean McManus, you mentioned Jim McKay earlier. Sean McManus is Jim McKay's son and was the former head of CBS Sports and just did a great job with the Masters and made Masters telecasts, behind the scenes what they are today, in addition to a number of other sports that he worked on. So it's going to be a great night. Food will be great. And we still have, we actually are offering foursomes to play Westchester Country Club that day, either the West or the South, of course. And everything all proceeds, ticket sales, and the promotion for the golf go to our charities, mostly caddy funds.
So how do people buy tickets?
They can go to our website, MGWA.com.
Is it .org or .com?
I think it's .com.
You should know that.
Well, okay. If com doesn't work, go with org.
All right.
All right. MGA.com, MGWA something. But it's going to be a great night. It really will be. And we're all looking forward to it. So please, if you can make it,
I'll be there. How do people buy your book?
Amazon, Thrift, Barnes & Noble, any of the online booksellers has it. Or you can come see me at the Morristown Festival of Books on October 11th. And it'll be available there.
I have mine. So. Last question. What have I had 50 questions. I think I've asked 10.
I know. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. This is the list of questions.
And I didn't ask any of them.
That is the list of questions that Gordon submitted for my approval.
So
you got to most of them, I got to say.
Which one, I know you prepared for them assiduously. So which one didn't I ask that you want to answer?
Let me see.
What about that DWI? You don't want to answer that one?
Well, you asked about Live Golf. We didn't talk about that. Well, the one thing the Live Golf did to this Ryder Cup is Phil Mickelson would have been the U.S. captain.
Maybe.
For Bethpage 2024, absolutely. That would have been a no-brainer. The fact, he is beloved by New York golf fans.
True.
He's always played well here. He won at Baltusrol, although that's New Jersey. So I recognize the distinction between New Jersey and New York. But he was ticketed for this one, and he would have had it had he not gone over to LIV. But that's another story, and I don't blame him for it at all.
Hank?
But he could have been the captain here, and it was. Did I mention that? Oh, the other thing we didn't talk about was the bromance between Keegan and Phil at the 2012.
That wasn't in my questions, but that's a good question.
No, it wasn't one of your questions, but it's one of my questions. And if you remember, they just blew through the first three matches. And then Davis Love sat them because Phil said that they were mentally exhausted, even though none of their matches had gone past the 14th hole, and alternate shot, you're only hitting every other shot. So I don't know how exhaustion could set in.
This is David Love the turd, right? I'm not a big fan.
I didn't say that. Okay, Davis, I did not say that. But anyway, but I did say that what should have happened, I was walking the ocean course with Mark Bradley, Keegan's father, that year. And he said, you know who Keegan really wants to play with? And I said, who's that? He says, he wants to really play with Tiger, because he thinks he could kick him in the ass and get him going, because Tiger's Ryder Cup record in singles was fine, but in partner play, it was awful. They just never find a partner for him. And Keegan thought he was that guy. So I would tell Davis, why didn't you just, if Phil was mentally exhausted, let him sit and regroup and get his thoughts together for Sunday, and sit Steve Stricker, because that partnership wasn't really working that year with Tiger, and put Keegan with Tiger and see what happens there. And that's the session where the Europeans regained all that momentum, and mostly because of Ian Poulter's heroics, and took the momentum into Sunday and kind of ran away with it. So that's one thing I would have. Been one of my questions.
Whatever happened to Poulter?
Oh, he's still around. He went to LIV.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. All the people who went to LIV, they're like, they don't exist anymore. They took the money and
their bank accounts do
that's
exist.
True, but that's not what real golfers.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that in 2014, if you remember, Phil threw Tom Watson under the bus at the post-match press conference.
You were there, right?
I asked the question. Yeah, my question. So I am a very small part of Ryder Cup history, but not inconsequential, actually. That led to the whole task force thing. So,
which went nowhere, right?
Well, it went somewhere in 2016, but it wasn't. It hasn't gone as planned afterwards.
Which is the larger question: is will the U.S. ever become a team rather than a bunch of individual players, right? Because that's always a knock.
I think they're a team. I think they want to win the Ryder Cup. I think the Europeans their underdog mentality brings them together much better. Even if they're favored this year, they're going to go in with a chip on their shoulder because they're going up against the big bad United States of America, and it goes beyond golf. It's kind of what what happened after 47, after the war, and all of a sudden, the disparity was so great, and they've kind of had a little bit of an inferiority complex ever since.
Yeah.
So I think that's what brings them together. The U.S. doesn't really have that.
Think Trump?
But at times they did. I mean, like, again, 2008, Paul Azinger, great captaincy. He brought that team together, and they played for each other.
Think Trump will show up?
Yes.
Yeah. How could he not?
That'll be fun. That'll be fun. And I don't think the crowds will be as bad as people think.
I do. So. I hope they are.
But when Trump's there, when the president is there, I think we will have a little bit of a commotion.
Yeah. So. Well, thanks, Hank. I appreciate your time, and best of luck with the book. And I'll see you actually on the 9th. You playing at, what was it?
No.
You're not playing.
No, I'll still be here in North Carolina.
Oh, you're in North Carolina. That's right. Okay. That's right. You have houses all over the world. I keep forgetting.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Hank.
I joined the LIV media tour. That's me.
Okay.
All right, Gordon. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
And I will say one thing. You and Anthony have been doing a great job with these podcasts. It's something I started this year as president. And if you haven't, here's another plug for the MGWA. But if you haven't seen these podcasts, they're all on YouTube. We have an MGWA channel. Go back and watch some of them. They're really fascinating. We've done some really good ones, and we'll keep doing them. I think it's fun. I think it's been a really great thing, or as President Trump would say, it is really great.
Okay. Enough said. Thanks, Hank. Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye. See you, Gordon.